Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me here, and it's glad to see you all here at the Tech Field Day number 9 in Austin at Dell. So, did you all have a good day so far?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I know you had a Dell Solution Center tour. You guys also had a couple of sessions on data protection and stuff like that too. So all geared up. I hope you're all tired and you're going to fall asleep and not ask me any questions. But with
You
that,
know me better than that.
yes, Howard. Now Howard cannot speak today.
You remember what happened the last time
Oh,
somebody
yeah.
said that.
Yes. So I am introducing myself. My name is Ganesh Padmanabhan. I'm part of the Enterprise Systems and Solutions group here at Dell. The Enterprise group, my primary responsibility is, other than being a janitor at night trying to clean up all the messes everybody. No, I'm kidding. I lead the technical product marketing team for our solutions business. So everything from converged infrastructure to workloads, applications, architectures, to virtual desktop environments in private cloud, that entire spectrum, and primarily on the technical front. So today, what I'm going to talk to you guys about is active infrastructure. Now, some of you would have already seen this, heard about this, or heard some flavor of it. We talked a lot at the Dell Enterprise Forum last couple of weeks ago. And what it is our vision of our next generation data center. And there is a portfolio associated with it called the active infrastructure. There are things like active systems, a software layer, IP called Active System Manager. I'll talk through all of that. But what I want to take a few minutes in this presentation is take you through our vision, the journey, and what the portfolio consists of. And then we'll do a transition, and Preetham from my team is going to get a little deeper into the Active System Manager, which is the orchestration layer or the software piece that actually brings this whole active infrastructure together. Sounds like a plan? Okay. So no surprises here. The first slide here, the chart I have is the problems IT faces. Now, who disagree with any of this part here? The first one says only 29% of the general business population consider IT to be agile, flexible.
How did it get to be that high?
I-
Yeah. Do they not understand what the words mean?
That's exactly what it is, right? I did talk about this to one audience who put their hand up and said, "No, that's true. That's not true. It's 100%." I'm like, 100% of people think that IT is agile, flexible, and distributed? I'm like, no, the other way. Mm-hmm. It's the 100% think they don't. So, and the second thing is about the split of IT expenditures in organizations. Again, no surprises here. OpEx and maintenance and keeping the light bulbs on still remain to be the number one spend in IT. And then the last part is actually an interesting thing that, that metric caught our eye when, we were talking to a few other folks, and a lot of people tell that most of the IT is still so human resources dependent that most of the errors or downtime, 75% of that is caused through some human error. Somebody wrote a bad script, plugged in a network cable into a port he shouldn't have to cause a boot storm, things like that. But fundamentally, the issues, there are many other issues that are facing IT today, but the notion of actually IT not being fast enough to deliver to my needs, my business needs, the fact that it's actually it's not efficient to run IT, it's not efficient to actually do all the multiple tools, multiple resources, multiple touch points kind of IT, and then the service quality is being hampered by a lot of human intervention. These are the key issues that we are actually targeting to solve with our active infrastructure portfolio. What's our vision? And then on the left is what I just the picture of what IT is today or yesterday, if you will. I know again, this is not just two sides. This is just two ends of the spectrum, right? There is a lot of customers who are at different layers of maturity, levels of maturity in this whole spectrum. On the right hand, you have IT is being viewed as someone who keeps the rest of the business on, just maintains IT, run the business apps. It's an infrastructure provider. I just want a computer, and IT provides that. To all the way the IT service-centric data center view left, which is a much more agile and efficient picture of IT being a business enabler, having the seat on the table with the CEO and CFO and making decisions on how technology can empower and help the business be more competitive against their competition. And so the characteristics of what that means in terms of infrastructure, software, and the data center itself changes radically. On the left, you have everything from being, it's very fixed, it's very slow, usually an amalgamation of multiple architectures in IT that's been, multiple siloed deployments, if you will, to a shared, much more elastic, nimble, and modular integrated fashion of the way infrastructure and software and hardware and everything is provisioned and deployed. And thoughts, comments, agree, disagree? Is that where you were seeing, what's the difference?
That's the same story that we've been trying to talk about with IT for the last 80 years.
I think you're preaching to the choir, yeah.
So that's what everyone's been trying to do all this time, and we haven't succeeded.
We haven't succeeded. No, collectively as an industry, there's just still a lot of work to be done to get there. And
from what perspective? Are you talking about you're a part of IT or you're outside talking to IT?
Both. This is kind of an external business perspective, like things about it's fixed, slow, custom, fragmented, and like IT understands that to a certain level. IT tends to not believe it is as bad. The business hates IT, pretty much.
Actually, that goes both ways.
Oh, exactly. Yes, it does.
I've seen. I work also on both sides of the house, and I have a pretty heavy IT background. But the business oftentimes treats IT like
redheaded stepchild.
I was going to think of another word, but doesn't give it enough resources, doesn't give it enough people, expects way too much, won't implement any kind of governance processes, things like that.
Yep.
Basically, treats them as order takers. So there's definitely a two-way street in this. The business is just as much at fault as IT for the situation that IT's in right now.
Yeah, I can I understand that view. I've come to change my attitude on that, and I think that it's IT's problem and they need to solve it, because that can be done because this is going off topic a little bit, but I'm interested to see where Dell's what you bring to this, and like, okay, this is not a new problem. How are you going to be solving this? Because my view is that IT can have a lot more agency. I think saying that the business needs to solve the problem removes a lot of agency from IT and makes it seem it's like, well, there's nothing we can do. Actually, there's a lot we can do.
Understood. And agreed. I'm sorry, this is off topic too, but
this is good
this is something I'm sort of passionate about.
Yeah.
I think IT does a lot of stupid things.
Yeah.
I mean, I've spent 10 years as a CIO, and I've gotten to watch a lot of these things and try to fix them. And it's every time I talked to, I wrote a couple articles on 10 things IT needs to stop doing. And I don't know if any of you saw it, it was on Tech Republic, but, and they're just the BS tasks that waste time. And a lot of this stuff speaks to that. But the kind of responses I got back were not from IT leadership or from IT staff members, were things like, if we do all this stuff, we're out of jobs, so why would we do any of your recommendations?
Yeah, and that's the fight I see right now.
You got it.
Like, people do not want to change because they cannot imagine what they would do once they change. Like they keep they keep doing things manually, no automation, any of that stuff, because they just cannot imagine what life would be like otherwise. All of the cool things that they could be out doing, that doesn't occur to them.
The thing is that that's happening anyway, and again, we're way off topic now.
I think so to summarize, I think one thing, this is a very important part, and I'll call it out later on, right? When you think about technology adoption in terms of, like, say, converged infrastructure or cloud or anything, the number one barrier in organizations is still organizational structure and people and the processes that go along with it. It's not so much technology, it's not so much, it's all these concerns that you were just talking about. It's like, if you automate the whole thing about provisioning a virtual infrastructure, automating my server storage and network policies, what will all those people do? And it's all that thing that we, as an industry, again, as influencers as well as companies like Dell, we have to educate people more on this topic as well, right? It's not just building out the products and solutions, but it's about enabling that ecosystem to enable that transition. And so we'll talk a little bit more about it later on. So what our view, just to take a step before I introduce the portfolio and talk about the active infrastructure itself, we landed on some key tenets on how and what will make our solution, our offerings differentiated from others and also solve the right problems for the customer. And these are the 4 tenets that we have. One is our commitment towards being open in the way we architect our products, in the way we solve these problems, in the way we don't lock our customers down on a particular architecture or a software or a proprietary stack or a protocol or anything like that. And there's 2 aspects of that open thing. It's not doesn't always mean open source. It's about making sure they use a standards-based approach that help customers adopt and grow as they want it. And the other thing is investment protection. Like, you know, I would love to have every single customer of mine have a Dell storage gear, Dell networking gear, Dell software gear, and Dell server gear. Not always the case, because we don't start from that layer. It's not always a greenfield deployment. They have a Cisco investment that they've made. They have an EMC investment on storage. So having and allowing that kind of giving this value that we're bringing with active infrastructure, even to those third-party ecosystem, which is adjacent to our core infrastructure, absolutely. That's a part of our portfolio. That's a part of the offering, which we think is very uniquely differentiated in the industry than anybody else. And you'll see that when we talk about the products and in the offerings itself. Being intuitive has got 2 aspects to it. One is allowing the transition from a knowledge base and time to value perspective, saying instead of actually, when you look at, there was this exercise we did, we looked at SharePoint deployments over like 200 customers a couple of years ago. And in a virtualized SharePoint and a virtualized environment, defined the problem as such. We just went back, mined through the data in terms of how the architectures were. What we found out was about 80% of the implementations were almost exactly the same in terms of the infrastructure and the way it was designed. The difference was only about how the user quota, the policies on the application layer were defined and stuff. But what that told us was actually there was an absolute approach. There's a value that we can add to customers by capturing these learnings and bringing it back to them in a pre-integrated, pre-configured, pre-sized kind of packages. And that led to our, we started out with this vStart set of offerings, which morphed into in our next generation as active systems, and with the management layer, with the orchestration layer and stuff. So that to me is intuitiveness, and the way you make it more intuitive for people to actually adopt newer architectures, newer technologies through our pre-integrated, pre-built kind of architectures. The second part is about user experience, right? Being administrator, this also links back to the earlier comments somebody made on, and Bob made on the organizational challenges, if you will, right? People love, geeks, all of us, I love the CLI. I mean, that's the way it is, right? But more and more, when we actually have to, but I can't remember 3,684 commands in the CLI.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Says
So
the
likes
Windows
that.
guy.
Yeah.
So how do you make that more intuitive from a user experience perspective, from an interaction perspective?
Press
right?
start to shut down.
Yeah.
Make
But
it
then
more
also
intuitive,
don't
just
go
take it away.
overboard and saying, are you sure you want to do it? Oh, are you really, really sure? Right? Like you get in Windows.
You can't
So-
get Clippy in the CLI.
No, but you can build a GUI that shows you the CLI results of what you did.
Yeah.
Like Exchange.
So that
AIX's Smith has always been cool like
so
that,
that so that you never have to look at the reference manual. You go to the GUI, you do it once, you see what the CLI got generated, and then you can use the CLI.
Yeah, and that's true. So one of the other ways we do it is actually also
me?
provide you a...
Say that again.
So ideally, you've got a system that's got a GUI.
Okay.
You perform a management task, so you need to do something 100 or 1,000 times.
Okay.
You go to the GUI, you do it once.
Okay.
The GUI gives you as output the CLI command.
Just like
So,
like a PowerShell
like
script
Yeah.
as-
right.
Yeah,
as the
exactly.
output from it. Right.
That's
Right.
how
PowerShell.
Exchange works. Anytime
Yeah.
you do anything
Oh,
Exchange,
yeah.
it gives you
And
the
so then
PowerShell.
you can take the PowerShell script that comes out of
on
PowerShell
the
line that
script.
comes out of
Yeah.
Exchange, drop it into your text editor,
Yeah.
replicate it 100 times, replace the name, and run that.
So why not to make it better, right? Have the software be able to do that orchestration for you, right?
That's a
You gotta have to
bingo.
do it.
Ding, 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 ding.
I don't-
Bingo.
Why do I have to think?
Winner.
I'm getting old. I don't.
Don't make me think. Yeah.
No, John, that's a
Thinking's
great
fine.
point.
Remembering.
So,
is bad.
I'll show you that in what we do. This is actually very, very, very good discussion, right? The CLI is not going to be dead or it's not dead. It's going to remain there. People are going to still want to use it for different reasons. Scripting, automation, that kind of stuff. But that shouldn't be the only way you automate, is your point, right? So how about we provide you an orchestration method, a scheduling engine, and something that's wrapped around the UI that you can actually say, okay, I've done this once and I've figured out how to do it, but I don't want to click on these 5 buttons anymore. How about it's only 5 buttons this time, then 18 commands. But automate this. Let me help me automate this, do 200 times, things like that. So that's also a part of the intuitiveness that we're trying to bring into the user interface. The last two part, automation, requires no introduction with this group for sure, but everybody I can tell is nodding, saying the value of automation that we bring in or anybody brings in is going to be hugely valuable in this environment. The way we do it, again, most of the problems, back to your point, Justin's point earlier, saying the problem statements have been the same. The problem statements are the same for the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years, right, or at least. The problem statements every one of our competitors also looking exactly the same. It's how you go about solving it is these design tenets that gives us the differentiator. The solutions may also at times look alike. I mean, it might actually be comparable to something else that you hear from. But automation through the concept of templates that go beyond just the infrastructure and all the way to the application layer and help you provision, automate, manage, and deploy a multi-tier application, that kind of environments. And then last, this is where it's an exciting time for us to be at Dell, for me to be at Dell, because at this point we have IP ownership all the way from the data center to the end user in terms of the end user devices and client PCs and stuff like that. And every facet, every aspect, Dell software, Dell servers, storage, networking, infrastructure management and stuff. So what we can bring in, again, it's more about what that gives us, that experience gives us a breadth of these customer sets, this breadth of this IP knowledge base where we can bring in an end-to-end point of view into whatever we do. So when we build out an active system, for example, for a VDI architecture, we've already thought through the fact, okay, if this needs to be hooked up to a thin client versus a zero client versus a graphics accelerated client, how do we need to cross-architect it differently, and things like that. So that kind of end-to-end nature gets brought into our methodology, and the labs you saw today and our engineering labs, they all have that cross-functional pollination across the portfolio to bring that end-to-end point of view.
How granular is that?
How granular?
Yeah.
Depends on, like for example, this example of a VDI that I talked about, right? There are things that you want to do if I'm, for example, the same example, I have a VDI architecture, and I want to enable an architect for a thin client environment, which is just a dumb terminal. I just want to, stream it. Versus I want a graphic accelerated environment, which I want back-end graphics acceleration as well as a front-end acceleration. Now, in an architecturally, we have to think about, if I need to support that graphics acceleration, I need to have PCI flexibility to provide GPUs, right? One example. The other example is in terms of management, saying if I provision this, if I have to provision and manage an end user device like an MDM module, like ZenPrice or some of the whatever the MDM from Citrix, we have to have that to be orchestratable from our active system manager or some kind of a solution like that. So those kind of things is what I meant by kind of like that end-to-end point of view. The framework you'll see is pretty comprehensive. And what we're trying to do is actually on a case-by-case basis, on the working on problem statement to problem statement basis, we can bring in that end-to-end point of view and make it happen. Does it make sense?
It does.
Okay. So with that, the architecture, the portfolio of Dell Active Infrastructure is very, the marketing guys spend a lot of time trying to, how do you simplify it, because there's so many products, so many offerings, so many solution sets and stuff. How do we get it to a 3-tier model that everybody can easily take away? So the vision of active infrastructure is Dell's solution strategy, if you will, enterprise strategy, the way we look at it. It's about accelerating IT services or providing a service-centric model for IT. Doesn't always mean a private cloud. Doesn't always mean a shared infrastructure. It just means that application deliveries or output that IT provides to the business is being looked upon as a service. So enabling that ecosystem around it. How do you provision? How do you manage a service? How do you deploy a service and things like that? It's not just about a machine or a workload or an OS, right? Bringing that with the notion of reducing time to value through some of the automations and pre-built systems, enabling greater efficiency through automation, and then ensuring quality of service by reducing manual interventions and accelerating, or removing the need for doing multiple consoles, multiple tools. So the portfolio has got three tiers of offerings. The first one is the active solutions on the top. Everything starts with the workload or something that's going to run on this base infrastructure. So what we have is validated solution reference architecture, back to John's question on how granular we can go. We have reference architectures that are actually built and get detail out to the level of what kind of memory architecture do you want on a VDI stack versus a SharePoint or a Exchange application stack and things like that. Very detailed reference architectures to ensure better optimization of the infrastructure deployments for the different application sets. The Active System Manager is our common, think of that as a unified management platform. Single pane of glass, I don't like that terminology. That'll always kick off a discussion, which is good and bad.
Discussion's one word for it. Yeah.
I know, right? Single pane of glass, you just started that. Single pane of glass, I used to say, was IT fiction, right? Or it's an IT dream, right? Everybody chases towards it. The notion is great, but if you try to make everything plug into a single pane of glass, you're not going to be successful. So it needs to be more contextual in terms of the management. It's not about trying to bring everything that you do in 50 different panes into a single pane. That's just tool aggregation, if you will, right? But what we're talking about in Active System Manager is a contextual management of saying, if I have server, storage, networking, and the applications that run on it, and the virtual layer, about 20% of the tasks that I need to do to get that up and running, which I apparently happen to do about 80% of the time, needs to be automated through a single pane of glass. That's the way, and we'll go into detail about Active System Manager and you get what I'm talking about. But you're right. I mean, it's not. Single pane of glass is a very loaded statement. It's a very loaded term, but it's about unified management models, if you will.
You guys haven't thrown anything at them yet for saying.
What's that?
This group has got a history of throwing things at people who mentioned
know,
Gartner and single
Throw
panes
the
of
cheese
glass.
at them.
Make them wear the cheese.
Hey, how about
Make them wear the
software?
cheese.
That's the cheese of shame.
How about software-defined data center?
That's okay right now.
That's the N word, right?
Yeah.
Cloud management.
It's getting
Cloud
old, but,
management, right?
Virtualization is out and cloud
Yeah,
is
but
out.
it's still,
Now it's SDDC.
still legal.
STDC. And then the last, the bottom tier that you see here in the portfolio is the active systems, or these are the pre-integrated infrastructure building blocks, if you will, right? So it's a collection of server, storage, networking, either general purpose built for virtualized environments or shared infrastructure environments, shared application environments, or optimized for specific applications like a VDI stack or an SAP HANA and things like that. So with those tier of shared infrastructure, the building block resources, building block compute pods, if you will, are called the active systems. And the notion of one of the other things that I want to, before I go a little more detail into each one of these, one thing I want to call out is to enable the right customer experience for us, it's all about not just the offerings, not just the solution set. I mentioned this earlier. It's about building that ecosystem, right? And how we go about doing it, it's all about things all the way you start with the investments we're making in the sales force to have more knowledgeable, highly technical resources. We can sit down and have an architectural conversation with the customer, to getting them through the educational process of understanding how does organizations need to change to adopt some of these newer architectures, to providing a single unified support model in the end. When a customer calls in and says, like some of our competitors, if they call in, they got to say, are you calling about this networking or this storage or this compute? They can call in and say, I'm calling about an active system, give a service tag number, and that gets routed to a solution specialist who understands how the architecture is laid out. So things like that. One is about improving the customer experience for that customer, but more importantly, it also enables us to do this larger industry transition by increasing knowledge that's available and confidence that's coming into the industry. So this is a more technical view of the portfolio of what we have. On the active solutions, we have the 3 tiers of offerings, 3 kinds of offerings, if you will. Private cloud and desktop virtualization, of course, are 2 omnipresent shared infrastructure closely tied to virtualization kind of architectures. So we support a variety of cloud offerings, a VMware-based cloud, Microsoft-based cloud, Dell's with our Inspiradius acquisition, so things like that. Desktop virtualization, we have a VMware stack. We have different options for small, medium, large kind of thing for VMware vSphere, VMware Horizon View, so it's what they call it now. And the Citrix Zen Desktop, Zen Mobile implementation on the desktop mobility side, and also the Quest vWorkspace offerings along with Microsoft Hyper-V. The enterprise application is a broad set, so we chose a very simple word to describe everything. But think of solution sets like unified communications and collaboration, Exchange SharePoint Link. On the larger end, you have the big workloads like Oracle databases, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, run the business apps on that side. We have a lot of those solution reference architectures that are available on the active solution set. The IT services ecosystem basically is our Dell Software Group ecosystem, a couple of third-party software as well that we actually have integrations with. And then what ties us all together from a management ecosystem perspective, all the active systems and all of these infrastructure layer, is this IP called Active System Manager, which is a single pane of glass. What's that?
I said wait for it.
Wait for it, a single.
So at the reference architecture layer, is that all assuming that it's a greenfield opportunity where everything's going to be Dell, or do you have like a NetApp here or whatever?
That's a great question. Actually, it's both.
Okay.
So most of our reference architectures, there's 2 kinds of reference architecture. This one is at the bottom are what we call the platform reference architecture, more infrastructure centric, right? How do you turn around compute, storage, networking? The solution architectures on the top are more around, it'll be a little more flexible under the underlying infrastructure, saying if I want to set up, and I don't know why I keep picking VDI examples today.
It's not VDI anymore, though.
It's desktop
Isn't
virtualization.
it the year of VDI?
It's end user computing. Sorry, thank you.
Software-defined
yes.
user.
No, not yet. That's next month.
I like that. No, so if I take that example.
So you went from a term that meant something to a term that means absolutely nothing?
I didn't make up the rules.
So for end user compute, or software-defined end user compute to be, our reference architectures give you the flexibility from saying if I'm taking a Citrix Zen Desktop-based implementation, I have the ability to say the architecture that I want should leverage Cisco Nexus networking instead of Dell Force10, right? So that is already accounted for in the architecture, and we have things like tools like a solution advisor, if you will, where you can go in and say, select your constraints, which is like, we call it constraints. They would call it, customers may call it something else.
So that top layer is more focused as like the platform layer and above. You don't really care about the infrastructure.
Correct. And then, and some of them, so when I said both, because some of them actually lay out VDI and say, for example, we just launched a reference architecture for unified collaborations and communication with Microsoft Stack, SharePoint, Exchange, and Link. And there we actually go into the detail of saying, okay, if you're going to deploy this as a UC&C stack on a greenfield environment, this is the gold standard, and that includes an active system 800 at the bottom and things like that. But most of think of the solution reference architectures are more flexible, more application centric, and the ones at the bottom are more platform and infrastructure centric.
So the pre-integrated systems, is the rub there that you offer some kind of like 45 days from the PO being cut? Is that the advantage to going all Dell?
It's the advantage for going all Dell from a couple of perspectives. One is time to value. We have an SLA from order to production. So this whole thing comes rack cabled from our Dell factory with software preloaded. It comes on site. You just had it'll be even shrink wrap a service engineer with it, right? So if we arrive, basically, this deployment services are built in. So
all
you
through
don't.
Dell, or do you leverage the channel as well?
We leverage channel as well. So we are actually leveraging channel as well as Dell. And it arrives, the whole thing, we, on an average, take from an active system, the couple of installs that we did in the fresh data last couple of weeks, from the time the rack arrived, we have the whole thing up and running in one of our large customers in less than a week. And it's running, meaning you go through the testing, you go through their porting their workloads and that kind of stuff, and the whole thing up and running. So that's the huge benefit of going all Dell in a pre-integrated fashion.
Okay.
But we do have most of our, and you would expect this too, more of the customers use the reference architecture, but then they want some modification because they have a Cisco networking gear or a NetApp storage, for example. So we also support that flexibly. Now, the finer details are, from an active system manager perspective, the third-party support that we have today is only for Cisco Nexus. So if it's a EMC or a NetApp storage environment that we're integrating into, that support is coming later this year. But at this point, they'll have to do it from the Unisphere or the NetApp, FS Manager, or whatever.
Okay. You'll still cover the rest, but a piece of it will be up to them to
Correct.
manage and configure.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the integration platform, the management platform, Active System Manager itself, a couple of things, and we'll go in the details, and then I'll let Preetham go into a lot more detail on this. You think about it this way: it's a single automation solution that allows me to do the following. I get the hardware that's coming in. I can now discover everything that's in there: server, storage, networking. Discover as a complete pod instead of just I have a server, I have a storage, I have a thing. I can discover it as an active system 800. So it allows me to manage it as a whole than just piece parts. And then I can go build out and define these templates, if you will, for how that infrastructure needs to be laid out. A classic example, if I want to go and provision an ESX cluster on 4 hosts, that involves me provisioning ESXi on individual hosts, making sure that I create the storage LAN, create the data store, do the configuration of the vSwitches and vNetworking and the whole thing up. We measured it closely. Takes about 384 steps to get it done. We have a pre-built template that ships out of the out of box on the software that you can just point the servers to it and say, go provision ESX, and point to the repository where your licensing and things are, and we automate the whole process in just 2 clicks. So things like that's the template's value. And that's the infrastructure layer things, and we also have templates. We're going to start, there are customers who are deploying or created their own templates based on, for Microsoft SharePoint and SQL Server 2012, which, by the way, is going to be an out-of-box template later on this year, later on this month, which allows you to automate the 3-tier architecture that you want, not just the infrastructure, but then say spin up the 5 VMs, for web servers, the two VMs for application, and the 16 VMs for database, and things like that. So you can automate the whole thing as a template. Save it once. You can see the actual steps of execution that's happening. You can save it, but you can automate that as build once and rinse and reuse every time kind of a template.
Yeah, so on that, a little bit related to what we were talking about before. So one of the restrictions or constraints, as you put it, of having a templated build is that you can't change things the way you like it. So how do you see approaching that with customers? For example, DBAs are famous for wanting to tune everything to death.
To there.
And I remember when we were talking about it the other night, that when Oracle came out with their database appliance thing, was one of the things that they wanted to do was to have people stop trying to tune it because they would tune it wrong and then it would break and they would blame Oracle for that. So that's one thing about, if you lock everything down, that you have to do that in order to standardize. But that means that all of the people who today, part of their job is figuring out what the tunables should be set to and how to build it and make sure it's done right, they don't get to do that anymore.
No, great question. The way and I have customers who ask me that same question too. The way we do it is that Active System Manager, the fact that we provide these templates out of box is honestly a nice to have. what we really provide with Active System Manager is the ability to build your own templates, right? So what we see most of the customers use, here's how a typical, like the SQL 2012 customer happened during a customer engagement. We saw that multiple customers were using the same architecture, so we made it out of the box, right? Saying, okay, it's going to be useful for others. But it happened this way. They looked at it and say, can I build a template? Yes. The base templates are VMware, ESX cluster provisioning, Hyper-V provisioning, that kind of stuff. And they said, okay, I want to go automate the way I set up my SQL consolidation environment. And they automated, what they get with Active System Manager in that case is a toolbox that they can say, go drag and drop the resources they want to do, draw the lines, right-click on it, provision, and assign the VLANs necessary, and they save it as a template. Now, what they have right now is they have the value of standardizing as a template, but it's their template than what we are setting it to.
Yeah.
Right?
So who are the people who are doing that said, hey, that's great, I want to do that? Who, like, at what level were those people?
Those, usually the architects, the IT architects, the application architects,
Yep.
and stuff.
So all of the infrastructure guys, what do they do now? Because from Planker's point before is that when you sell this in there, it's like right now you have an internal fight going on because these guys hate architects because architects don't know anything and they live in an ivory tower, and what the hell do they know about running real systems because they haven't touched a command line for the last, or a console for the last 5 years.
Remark.
As do I. So, and again, it's one of those silly religious wars that goes on inside companies. But you've got, the fact that this is good, but it is quite disruptive, which means that it's going to break things that are non-technical sort of things, that people management issues.
Well, that's the same argument you have against things like Puppet and Chef, and it's the same thing. What happens when we automate this stuff? What happens when we build a template? I don't have to spend 10 hours building a server. I just push go, and then 10 minutes later it's done.
So the audience for this, so the sales audience, the people that you need to convince, you're not actually selling this to the infrastructure guys.
Oh, I wouldn't even. Yeah, I wouldn't start with those people at all.
Definitely not start with
Not everyone has an infrastructure team that's bloated to the point where they have that kind of tiers. Even at large environments, there may be such a small number of folks that you are selling this to the architects who are also being the engineers, and because I've done it.
Yeah.
And the beauty there is that they can do this design once and deploy with a junior guy who's even help desk and say, yeah, push the button 4 more times for me. I got to go deal with something else.
Yep.
The problem is typically that those systems don't work very well. I won't name names, but a lot of times deployment works okay. Changing or withdrawing or diminishing that service template that you're deploying fails miserably. So that would be the point that I would be most curious about is, okay, I've deployed this service, now I need to withdraw a server or blade or whatever it is, or modify that, and that's where it becomes very sticky.
And that's the thing, because 80 to 90% of the value isn't build, it's run.
Yeah, it's
and
run.
And
I don't think that's where this is going to help. You still need a tool, the Puppets, the Chefs of the world.
Well, let's say you're going through a hardware refresh and you want to replace the blades on a service that you've defined in a system like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well,
typically it's build a brand new one and transition the stuff over because there's no destroy or reduce button.
Yeah.
So then it becomes sticky.
I'm not arguing with you.
Well, I think, one of the, and we'll talk more on the software level, we go into the detail of that, is saying, what we've built in is the ability to go discover a net new hardware. And then you can have the option to deploy the same template that you actually created once, or take that and modify it slightly the way you want to, like let's say firmware versions and RAID settings and things like that. And you can apply that personality or that particular profile to any of the servers that come in, and you can they do things like have a slot, follow that property and things like that, and that kind of stuff too. But the organizational issue that you called out is an interesting one. And one way we are attempting to get there is through role-based access and enabling both kinds of users. And let me explain that. Imagine if we can help the architects and the engineers collaborate using the same design or a template designer kind of a model, where the architects, all they need to do is worry about, hey, this is the way I want my database to be set up. I'm the DBA, and I know exactly how many database servers I need, what are the characteristics of each one of them and stuff. And I need fiber channel 16 gig. That's all they would get to, and I know if you let them, they'll get deeper. And then they get the options from the other guy who are collaborating and adding the capability around saying, here's the infrastructure design base templates available. You can get this right now. If you want anything more, just put in a request. It'll take a build time, right? So it kind of changes the behavior a little bit. It makes it a little more collaborative. That's one of the ways we're attempting to solve it. Again, haven't done that yet, so we don't know if it works. But it's the organizational challenge is going to be one interesting aspect that we need to go. How do you, this goes back to the first comment when we started, right? How do you improve that collaboration across to ensure that they're all part of trying to solve the same problem?
You don't fix that with technology, that's for sure.
You don't fix that with technology, that's true.
That's a top-down fix.
So, let me see. So that's the active systems, this is the portfolio itself. Now we go into a lot more detail. I think the next few slides is all the ASM details and stuff, right? I want to, at this point, transition to Preetham, and he will get into a lot more detail on the active system manager itself. And let's have this dialogue. Let's look at some specific capabilities in terms of, hey, what can I do in terms of provisioning? What can I do in terms of managing? What are sessions, right? Can I maintain multiple sessions of the same template? Things like that, right? So we'll get into a little bit of bits and bytes on this one.